Hi everyone, I'm Haley and today I'm going to be going over the cultural Cinderella stories that I found for this week. I'm going to start off with Ella's Big Chance. It's a jazz age Cinderella. It's written and illustrated by Shirley Hughes. This story is set in the roaring 20s. As you can tell, she's got her like flapper girl dress and the shoes that were popular at the time. In this story, instead of her name being Cinderella, it's just Ella. She's a kind, very generous, giving woman. She helps her dad in his shop. As you can see, she dresses very simple in comparison to everybody in their like more formal attire. She's just very simple, wears solid colors, nothing too eye-catching. Later in the story, whenever she does get her elegant ball gown, I will find a picture. So here's a picture of the ballroom. As you can see, everybody's in their like simple colors, and she comes down the stairs in her sparkly, glittery, diamond-studded dress, which would catch the lights and just sparkle and get a lot of attention. In the story, it says striking, so just very vivid words that give you the idea that she's very, like, people are turning heads, they're looking at her, all attention on her beauty. The glass slipper, which you can kind of see left behind right there, again is their like modern fancy shoe. It's not really considered like a glass slipper or a stiletto. In the story, it is called a glass slipper, but it's fitted to the modern look of the 20s. In the story, the stepmother, try to find a picture of her too. Okay. Here's a picture of the stepmother and the stepsisters. She symbolizes jealousy and selfishness. She doesn't really want Ella to go out and live her life. She doesn't want her to be the star of attention. Just pretty much wants her to be their servant. The prince, he represents the happily ever after, the true love story that everyone craves when they're reading a fairy tale. This is them dancing together. She's in her normal clothing after they've like fallen in love. This is them dancing the night of the ball. This kind of shows some movement here with those illustrations. The fairy godmother, she pretty much like symbolizes magic, and with that magic is love. She wants her to have the very best, and when we think of the normal like Cinderella story, they have the carriage. In this case, the roaring 20s, there's the new vehicles that can come out, so it's a vehicle instead of a carriage, fitting the time setting. And the fairy godmother also makes all of Ella's dreams come true, just to make sure like she gets to have that experience, giving her all of her wishes. And the ballroom, you can tell it's like set in the 20s. It's like very loungy, and all of their outfits reflect the 20s, and their hairstyles, how it's like pinned up out of their face. There's not a lot of like curled hanging hair. It's pinned up and back, kind of resembling a short hairstyle of today. As far as the illustrations go, they're very intricate little lines. As you can see, there's like some hatching, and there's a lot of different hues and colors. Like there's a lot of bright colors going on, and for her, there's a lot of attention going there because she's drawn beautifully. But when there's certain things we need to have attention drawn to, like for instance, having the stepmother try on her dresses to feel beautiful and confident. She's got those bright colors. She wants to attract the attention. But then here you see the dark, dull colors of her being sad because she doesn't have a chance or a way to get to the ball. I think for each page, all of the illustrations pretty much reflect exactly what the story is telling. It just gives a clear picture of what's happening, so you're visualizing and seeing what is being said in the story. So that's my first story. My next story is The Gospel Cinderella. It's by Joyce Carol Thomas and illustrated by David Diaz. In this story, it's set in a southern swamp. So it's outside, there's a lot of nature, there's not a lot of in the building type scenes. In this story, Cinderella is a singer. It's supposed to reflect the original Cinderella story, just has a little bit of a twist on it. In this story, the gown, instead of actually having like a physical gown, what is represented here is her voice. It is said to be as flavorful as licorice. And then here you can see her singing, and this kind of symbolizes like her voice going out, projecting, having some flow and rhythm to it. It kind of shows that singing is more powerful than a materialistic gown. And since it's a gospel, it's fitting for the theme of the story. The shoe, instead of having like a glass slipper that she leaves behind, it's her belt, her vine belt that she makes, that she has wrapped around her waist. It comes off and flies off. And it has some kind of patterns in the bright yellow, fitting for her culture. Okay, and then the stepmother, which is actually the foster mother in this story, she doesn't want Cinderella to project her voice. She knows it's powerful, she knows it's beautiful, but she doesn't want her to do anything about it. Rather, she wants her own daughters, which are portrayed right here, singing their version. And in the story, it says that they sounded so terrible, they got booed by the crowd and ran back to their row, where they scrunched low in their seats. And with the illustration, you can tell that it's just not flowing musically. And on top of that, in the crowd, you can see all of the people. They're just completely shocked, as well as booing. It's a fun, creative way to kind of brighten the mood. So the prince, he too has a very powerful singing voice. This is the prince right here in the blue. And at the end of the story, when they sing together, he's enchanted by the beautiful sounds that she creates. And that's them together singing. And the little bird coming. So in this story, the magic is music. As we all know, music is powerful. Pretty much everybody has music in their lives in some shape or form. And along with that is what enchants the prince in the end. He hears how perfect her singing was. And then when they were searching for the singer that they heard beforehand, and they finally heard her, he said, "Finally, we found our singer," the prince exclaimed. So they had been searching for the mysterious voice that they heard, and finally found that it was Cinderella. The fairy godmother is the Queen Mother Rhythm. This is her. Very beautiful. I think the illustrator did a very good job with just really portraying beauty. Like, culturally, we have different things that we wear. For them, they have their gaudy jewelry either in their hair, around their wrists, around their neck, and they have their own symbol and patterns, which it's just beautiful with the bright yellow, with the contrast with the dark hair, the dark skin tones, just beautiful. And the Queen Mother Rhythm gives Cinderella the strength to sing in front of everybody, and the choir altogether is pretty much just great, you know. So instead of having like a supposed ball, that is what the choir is. It's their group all together singing. In this story, I think the colors, they're just very, they pop. There's just a lot of like brighter colors. There's not a lot of dull pastel colors in this story. It has a little bit of a messier technique with the drawing. Personally, what I thought the reason for this was to represent that like imperfections are beautiful. And I think that's like a really deep message that not a lot of people would catch, but I think that shines true, that just because you don't have either a beautiful singing voice or a beautiful gown or whatever it might be, you are still considered beautiful. And I think, again, this story also, the illustrations really add to what the author is going with. So she's like baking here, that's what it's implying over here. And as it goes through, like, each page pretty much is represented in the illustration just the way it is in the text. So that is the second book. And finally, I have my last book, which is Cinderella. It's by Barbara McClintock. I'm really bad at pronouncing names. Forgive me. So, this is my last book. This book was published in 2005, but it's supposed to reflect the time of Louis XIV, and the illustrator was inspired by Paris. So it's going to be very gaudy, Victorian, medieval dress styles in this. So Cinderella was the servant for her stepfamily, which is like the normal Cinderella story that everybody's familiar with. So here is the stepmother and the two stepsisters on either side. As you can see, the stepmother's a chunkier woman. So the gown that Cinderella wears to the ball as you can see, it's very Victorian-like. You can tell with their hair, it's all up. They have like the big, flowy, poofy dresses, and hers are it's just way more poofy, way more flowy, very eye-catching, and she has like a lot of detail. And then the glass slipper, I will find a picture of that as well. So here's her running down the stairs before midnight, You can see her glass slipper falling off right there. And it's also fitting for their style in this day and time. They have like a little slip-on shoe with like a little flower or something like that. I don't really know. Right on the top of the shoe. I think in this story, the stepmother kind of represents greed. She wants everything for herself. She wants her daughters to be in the spotlight. So the prince, here is the prince. Again, he's the true love story. He is the knight in shining armor, if you will. Pretty much the happily ever after of every fairy tale. And what I think is really cool about this particular story, in the end, the prince makes the stepfamily realize that they treated Cinderella so poorly, and eventually they apologized and they all were happy together in the end. So the fairy godmother in this story, we're familiar with the carriage, as I said before in the last story. This one in particular, there's a lot of detail. It's a golden carriage. There's a lot of designs, intricate detail, and it's golden, so it's like very Victorian. It's very expensive. Just wow, perfect, you know. All of her dreams came true here. And the magic comes from the love at the end and the realization that the family was so treated Cinderella so poorly. That realization that that's not how you treat people. And I would go back to the picture of the ball. As you can see here, with like the chandeliers and like the pillars, it's just very set in the Victorian age. And like I said at the beginning, the illustrator was inspired by Paris. So personally, when I think of Paris, I just think of like complete beauty with light and just a lot of like design, floral pillars and all of that. The people have their big poofy wigs, their hair's all stood up, there's feathers, their gowns are super poofy and they're cinched at the waist with their corsets, you know. Okay, and then with the illustrations, I think I've been saying intricate a lot, but this one is definitely intricate. There's a lot of minute details, but it just shines through and it adds to kind of the style that they're going for, that it's very gaudy. There's a lot going on, a lot to look at. So like this page, we're jumping around different scenes throughout, but even with the smallest little drawings, there's a lot of patterns, there's a lot of movement, and a lot of detail put into every single drawing. So there's always something to look at, always something to realize. I've gone through this book like 5 or 6 different times, and each time I see something new. And with this one, I thought the color also had a lot to do with the story. It has more of a dull tone, and I thought that the reason for this was to kind of reflect age. Since it is the Victorian age is obviously very old, I think it represented in the colors, whereas my last story has the bright, like primary colors, secondary colors. These are more of a tertiary type color where it's like a mixture, where it has some different hues in it. It's got some whites, it's got some shading with the dark, but overall giving it that like dull color for this story. in the end, they live happily ever after, and they get married. And again, a lot of detail. Like every tree has so much detail going on here, and their dresses are just flowy, beautiful. And her bright white, just like it just stops. You're focused on her, and I think that's such a good thing about the Cinderella story is like you see the reflection of like the before and the after, and you're just like, wow. But even at that point, you realize that she doesn't even need the dress after all. It was just the fact that she's getting out there to experience her life, and then she finds her Prince Charming and lives happily ever after. So those are my 3 storybooks for this week. Thank you.